Welcome back. I'm here with M. David Chacon. He's running for district court, and I think you're on the ballot, right?
Yes, I am. I had the privilege of getting the most number of votes in Bernalillo County for any uncontested person on the ballot in June, and now will be the party's nominee for the general election.
How many petitions did you need?
Well, we needed.
I'm just curious. I mean, if it's for the sake of.
Absolutely, we needed to get on the ballot. We needed to get 934 voters in Bernalillo County who were registered within my party to sign that. With the help of my wife, friends, family, and volunteers, we were able to actually get over 3,000 votes. And
what's the minimum? What was the minimum?
We needed 934, and we got 3,064. So we were very excited. You never know of the signatures that you get which are good and which are not good, and there's no risk in having too many. There's only a risk in having too few.
Yes, and I think a lot of us learned who's trying to get petitions that there's always going to be some error there. And it's not always deliberate on the part of the constituents. Sometimes they're just not aware of how they're, maybe they moved and didn't. We run into these things.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. And you've seen some candidates learn the hard way. There was a candidate on the state treasurer's ballot who needed to get some additional signatures and just fell under 100 signatures short, and the judge removed them from the ballot. So you can see that they have a substantial impact. The electoral process must move forward and must be followed in every fashion. So that's.
And I think that's a fair system, though, right? To get the petitions that way, individuals know that this person reached out to the community and all that.
Sure.
You wouldn't change that.
Well,
right? I wouldn't.
I don't know if I would change it. There have been some severe criticisms about the way that we elect judges in the state of New Mexico, and there's people for and against.
What's the criticism there?
The criticism is that by having the electorate elect the judges, that perhaps we aren't electing the most qualified people to be judges, because, quite frankly, in judicial races, they're low-profile races, low-information races, and the suspicion or the fear is that the electorate as a whole doesn't really know the candidates, and that's why I'm sure every candidate that you invite to come on your show avails themselves to that wonderful opportunity to come and tell them who they are, why we feel we're qualified to be the next district court judge in Bernalillo County. And you hear a little bit about ourselves, and I think one of the beautiful things in life is when you take the bench, you don't take it in a vacuum. You don't all of a sudden become a judge. When you take the bench, you take your whole life experience that you've lived so far, and it helps you make better decisions. Whether it's your job. When I was younger, I worked at McDonald's. I cooked hamburgers. Whether it was working when I went to college at New Mexico State, one of the great jobs that I had is I got to be one of the first parking directors at New Mexico State, and I worked at the police department. I did that for 5 years, and so I was very excited about that.
So all these experiences, actually, I think, build you guys up. I always like interviewing individuals running for it's not an easy thing, number one, I recognize that. And then when we talk to them, we realize that it's such a wide array of folks that come into this field. And, they all have experience, legal, experience, and now they're getting into the judiciary. But you realize from talking to them, their experiences are very unique, and they are fair-minded to begin with when they say, well, let me put my name on the ballot. And I think you would agree with me on that.
Absolutely.
Judicial philosophy, I think, have to be extremely fair, otherwise you can't even put your name on the ballot there.
Right. There's a philosophy that when you come and walk through the courthouse doors, unlike any other place, even if you don't have money, if you don't have the right things, that you're going to get a fair opportunity to give your side of the story and to have it fairly adjudicated. And one of the great things that I've endeavored to do, and I've started to do that for example, I'm one of the, I currently hear cases. I'm the state gaming hearing officers. I'm appointed by the New Mexico Gaming Control Board to hear all their litigated cases. And so it was the first test of my judicial demeanor, so to speak. And I found myself early, by the way, I got appointed in 2004, and I continue to do that through this date. Early at that time, I would sit there much like a litigant would and go back and forth, and you would see noticeable reactions. I think my demeanor over time and my fairness has increased. Nobody learns to be a judge until you get in there and do it. I think that's the best practice.
And I agree with the process, the way it's done, where you take petitions, and I see the criticism. I understand their point of view too, and I hear them, and I say, okay, well, you have a point, but then this is our system right now, and we have to kind of respect the law in that manner. I mean, I wouldn't change anything. The thing that makes it difficult for individuals, and I'm speaking objectively, of course, that individuals come up and ask you, what do you think about this? It puts the person running for judge in an awkward position at that point.
Right.
Would you agree with me on that?
Well, sure. The canon, you know, the canons when you run for office are quite explicit that obviously anytime somebody comes before a judge, you don't want to have a judge that has already prejudged the case. And so people ask sometimes, how do you feel about the death penalty? What do you feel about abortion? What do you feel
get
about...
these questions when you're out there?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
You have to kind of refrain from answering that,
well,
at that point.
I don't answer them, but I'm polite, and I obviously respect the question first, that somebody has the ability to ask and think about. These are issues that they're concerned about, and they're asking about. That's the most exciting thing that we can do for the voters, is for the voters to get excited about the election first. And I know it's sometimes hard to get excited about a judicial election, especially if we can't say a particular view, but it's the hope for any litigant when they come to a courtroom and there's an issue involving, we don't have to deal with the death penalty anymore because it's been abolished in New Mexico, but pretending that's the issue, you don't want a judge on record already saying, this is how I view this, and despite the facts and circumstances in that case, they're predisposed. You want a judge who's going to listen to your side, to the other side, all sides. There might be more than two parties involved, and to take all that and then utilize the oath that they've sworn to apply the law fairly and make a decision. And that's what we need, judges who can make decisions, and I'm going to be one of those judges.
You have a pretty vast background, no doubt about your background and stuff. You, the bar admissions you mentioned, I think I saw you have you're able to work at, argue in front of the Supreme Court, correct?
Well,
let's talk a little bit about that way people that are watching, especially law students, they know what your background is and what your admissions are and stuff.
Well, thank you. I think that's one of the best parts of the public service that I've performed so far. In 1999, about 3 years after I was licensed in the state, the Supreme Court, responding to a letter I wrote, appointed me to the New Mexico Board of Bar Examiners. Mm-hmm. And the letter that I had wrote them involved one of my classmates, and by the way, now a very well-liked judge, who had taken the bar with me, had studied with me, and was one of my best friends, and missed passing the bar by 1 point, literally.
Wow.
And I wrote the Supreme Court a letter and said, and I'd almost call it scathing, and said, there's got to be a better way to administer this. There's got to be a better way that we can test the competence of lawyers, but not put somebody's life on hold while we wait to do that. And so in 1999, I had the Supreme Court letter and said, basically, put your money where your mouth is. And I had the fortunate opportunity to serve the people of New Mexico as a bar examiner for 13 years now. The Board of Bar Examiners is a Supreme Court agency, mm-hmm. and it's tasked with determining who should be licensed as lawyers in New Mexico. There are 12 attorneys. We create the bar examination, and more importantly, in recent years, we administer character and fitness standards. We don't want people that are coming into our court system who have a predisposition to lie, cheat, or steal, or otherwise affect the tribunal, because we want it to be fair. I had the opportunity to serve my last 3 years on the board as the board's chair, and quite happily, it's a lot of work, but I really do feel that it impacts directly who gets to practice in the quality mm-hmm. and the amount of legal services that are administered in New Mexico.
Would you like to argue in front of the Supreme Court?
I would obviously love to argue before the United States Supreme Court. I would obviously...
U.S. Supreme Court, I meant.
Yes,
yeah.
Of course. And I've argued before the New Mexico Supreme Court a number of cases. A couple dealt with character and fitness issues. Those are confidential, and so you'll never see any reported decisions or opinions. But
you see some of these big cases, you know, when they're talking
sure.
about Prop 8 in California, things like that, when they took it to the Supreme Court. I watch it very closely. Some cases, some I don't. But you watch the ruling and stuff. It's the way the way the ruling comes down. It's very interesting to see that process.
Absolutely.
To me, it was always fascinating to watch how the ruling comes down. We're always like holding our breath to see what the judges are going to say, because they always...
I don't, no matter what the decision that's ultimately reached, the decision that comes down, what I hope people take away from every court decision, whether they agree with the decision or not, is that judges, justices, the law makes a difference in their everyday life, period. And so they shouldn't ignore it. And that's why you've seen such a great push, particularly in recent years, to get the electorate to become more familiar with the people they're voting for. in elections that you can vote for people. In other states, when they're appointed, to have the appointing tribunal or the governor be more familiar and make sure that people aren't being appointed based on contributions and things like that. It's more ethics, more accountability.
Correct.
And you should demand and expect that from every judge, whether they're appointed or whether they're elected, period.
Interesting conversation. Let me take a break and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more. Maybe go into your background, where you grew up and things like that, okay?
Thank you, Jamar.
Take a short break, we'll be right back.